Welcome back to Call Me By Your Game, the podcast where I, your host, Connor McCabe, bring on a guest to hear from them about a meaningful or memorable video game from a particular moment in their life. On the show, I not only get into what made playing the game special and what it means to someone, but I also get into the context of their life and what sort of surrounded that experience that just filled in those gaps. This is a show about what makes video games and video game related stuff special to people. A little bit of housekeeping up top is that anything that my guest or I plug today on the podcast, you'll be able to find a link to those goodies in the show notes. So whether you're watching this on YouTube, which you should definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel, or if you are listening to this on your favorite podcast feed, your catcher, whether it be Apple, Spotify, who knows, if you scroll down in the show notes, you go to the episode, you'll be able to find a link to all of that great stuff, including for us, our Patreon. If you're listening to this episode the week that it comes out, this Friday, I guess that'll be, I could look up the date because we're recording this a little ahead of time. I'm like, this is like me springing this on myself as I remember when this is coming out. So on Friday, the 14th, March 14th, the poll for our next Games Club series over at Super NPC Radio is going to open for 1 week. This is available to all paid patrons. I would recommend, if you like our podcast here at Super NPC Radio, there's a free tier. At least subscribe there. But at $1 and up, if you subscribe for literally just the month for $1 or whatever, if you find something else you want to do, you can vote. The category, the theme for this Games Club series is Games Club sequels. We're finishing up our 9th Games Club series where we cover one game in a book club style format. We're currently finishing up Control, but what the Games Club series sequels is that we have 5 nominees that are follow-ups to games we've already covered in this format. We're talking about Pokemon Gold and Silver, Resident Evil 4 Remake, Mass Effect 2, Super Mario Sunshine, and there's definitely one more that I'm just not thinking of. And this is what you call being prepared, people, when you remember that you have this election coming up. So whatever that 5th game is, gosh dang, I'm sorry. But Sonic Adventure 2. How could I forget? Rouge the Bat's debut, I want to say, in the series. So anyway, I've talked about it for long enough. If you want to hear more series from us, check us out on Patreon or on our free feed at Super NPC Games Club if you want to sample the old ones. But that election's going to be open from the 14th to the 21st, noon to noon Pacific time. So yeah, if you want to make your voice heard, go ahead and subscribe at the $1 tier and up, or just follow us for free and see the other crap we put out there. That'll do it for the housekeeping and the plugging that I'm going to do at the top of the show. And we'll finally introduce our guest for today's episode. I'm so excited to introduce Metro Detroit dad, GameBoy Camera, funtographer, and game player. It is Dan Lane. Dan, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm very, very excited to be here.
You are so welcome.
Get into it.
I know, me too. I'm so excited to have you on the show. Immediately as we're here, and I know on the future video that I'm going to edit, I will have now overlaid your video onto the whole feature here. People will start to see that there's already something a little special about that about this episode. You're not coming to us through a normal camera. We got a GameBoy camera set up that you're capturing your image on.
The magic and the beauty and the majesty of a GameBoy camera. You can really just taste the pixels.
You absolutely can. I can't wait to even just use a screenshot of you from this for the thumbnail for the photo.
It's
for
crunchy,
the video.
isn't it?
Oh, crunchy is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, we'll get into it. But like, it's a whole aesthetic. Like, there's just something about this camera. It just creates such a singular, unique image that like things can get pretty close to, but you just cannot replicate it outside of a Game Boy camera.
Yes, I can't wait. If you're listening on the audio format, this is like one of the best excuses to go to our YouTube channel and watch the video version because it's going to be even better than normal.
It's going to be a challenging one if you're listening audio only. It's going to be pretty challenging. I'm going to try my best to like describe the images because I do have a lot of visual samples and like really there's a really interesting kind of dovetail of history that all kind of leads into the Game Boy camera.
Yes.
So you best be watching this video.
You best be. I expect this to have the highest view count any of them have ever had.
It better. Let's see it happen.
Please, folks. Dan, again, so excited to have you on here.
Thank you.
I know you through the Get Played Discord. One of my best friends in life, Matt Apodaca, is a host over there. He's talked about the show enough on this podcast. People know Get Played. You are a moderator in the Discord. That's how we became connected. But what do you want to share about yourself with the listener, and what do you want us to know about you today?
I just love games so much. I've like truly like there's that adage, where it's like, if you spend more than 10,000 hours on something, you're a master at it. And it's like, oh God, I've done that so many times over. Like my biggest hurdle as like a games enjoyer, like an enthusiast of it as an art form, is when the road ends at people not viewing it as an art form. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, this is no different than books or movies or music, where it's like you'll have tastes. Everybody will have their own individual tastes. It's all subjective, right? So if you don't like a certain type of game, you're not going to be inclined to play that type of game, I don't know. There's just so much like art and artistry that goes into games. It's really taken over my life in such a way that like now as a grown man, with a family, my source of income is games. And it's not like developing games. I'm the guy selling you your games. In the Metro Detroit area, like I manage a small retro resale shop, and that's all we do all day every day is we buy up old games, old consoles. I'm the guy behind the counter who's like, I'll give you this much for this much for this. I'm all day every day appraising games, talking about like the market. I'm steeped in it, and I've loved games just ever since like my earliest memory of gaming, which is we lived in Frederick, Maryland, and our neighbors who lived behind us had a boy who was like 4 years older than me, but he invited me over one day to show us the Nintendo, like the OG Nintendo Entertainment System. And I remember just being like, oh my God, floored by what I was seeing. And then he goes, yeah, and check this out, and pulls out a gold Legend of Zelda cartridge. And I'm it's over for me. It's over. Like, this is the coolest shit. I cannot believe this. Yeah, and from then on, it was just like any opportunity to play games, seek out games. Like I'd find my life would put me in areas where I was like, good, there are lots of games here.
Yes.
Like my grandfather lived in Delaware, and there's a lot of beaches up and down Delaware, specifically Rehoboth and like Dewey Beach and those beaches, and they have boardwalks, and those boardwalks have arcades. So like anytime that we'd go to the beach, we'd go swimming, and whenever you'd be too tired or have to get out of the sun, you just crawl into the arcade and just spend a couple hours in there. So I'm like a game freak. It's truly something.
You should start a company by that name if you haven't thought of that.
Yeah, actually, we can talk about Game Freak because they're involved with the GameBoy Camera in a really, really big way. Some really interesting stuff there, but we'll save it.
I love it.
Like the bulk of what I do is just like this game selling at the shop, and that alone, like I've been at the shop for like 4 or 5 years now, something like that, and it's a fascinating market. It's pawn shop adjacent, where people bring me their used goods, and then I have to appraise them, and there may or may not be a little bit of haggling depending on what it is, but that in and of itself is just like endless excitement for me, just what I see come across my table every day.
Yes, that's incredible. I mean, we don't know each other that well, but that is something I didn't know about you, and I'm so fascinated. Would you like to say the name of your store while you're here?
Yeah, I'll give it a shout out. Why not? I mean, like you wouldn't have to look too far online to see where it's all kind of out there.
Well, but, it's Best Buy.
A Funko Land. No, R.I.P. Funko Land.
Yeah.
I used to terrorize my local Funko Land with like whatever change I could scrape together, Going like, how much will this buy me, mister?
Yeah.
I bet they hate ride my bike up there. I'm sure they hated me. But no, it's a shop called Retro Taku Video Games. There's 2 locations in the Detroit area. There's one in Walled Lake, Michigan, and there's one in Madison Heights, Michigan. We are I believe the largest location like for video games, just like for stock alone. We have like the biggest selection and everything. We stock everything. So like from Atari 2600 and earlier sometimes to whatever the newest stuff is. And it's all used. So it's all fascinating because everything comes through my door, and it's all pre-owned, so everything comes in with a story. You know, somebody's like, oh, you know, this is all from a storage unit, I'm never gonna play this stuff ever again, you know. Or I hear people who are like, my grandfather died, here's all their stuff, you know, they're hawking. So I get to like witness these fascinating like human elements as well, where you know, people are selling me stuff just because they want it gone, or they're selling me this stuff because they really, really need the cash. And I don't know, that's also very entertaining. You get to kind of see like people at their best and worst.
Yeah. What
all
a
surrounding
world.
video games.
Yes, I mean, you're talking about like even just what you were just touching on there of like the humanity that can surround games. That's like a big that we're having a lot of great crossover here already, because that's the whole reason that I do the show. It's like, I mean, of course, I love the nitty-gritty of games, but on this show, we don't often really get the chance, nor is the point, to dissect why someone prefers Final Fantasy VI's battle system to Final Fantasy X. But it's the human element and like why it matters to someone. And so, in the stories that follow us with games. Right. So that, I mean, I was already excited, Dan. Now I'm even more excited.
Let's talk shop. No, the thing that I like, my big thing that I always try to get across to everybody that I hire in at the shop is, like, not only is it just a good philosophy to have if you're selling a good, it's just like, guess what? Everything we sell is good. Like, there are like, so I already have that philosophy generally, where it's like, hey, you know what? Like, every movie is somebody's favorite movie. Every song is somebody's, like, there's going to be somebody who likes something, whether or not I like it or not. No matter what. And who am I to turn my nose up at anything? Like, if somebody really, really, really loves a Madden, like a mainline Madden, something that I would not be interested in personally, like, why would I ever deny them that? If it makes them happy, and if it's like truly at the end of the day when they punch out and they just want to relax, it's like, why would I then like be like, what did you play last night at work? Like, be all snobby about it. So I try to get everybody on that same bench where I'm just like, every game is a good game. Just like, you need to approach it that way, where it's like, what works and what doesn't work. And don't be that snob at the game store who's like the Simpsons comic book guy, where it's like, I have to ingest everything as a 10 out of 10 or it's not worth my time, because then nothing is special, you know. Most of my most favorite games of all time are like solid B's.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
You know, they're fine. Like Guitaru Man, for example, is one of my favorite games. I love Guitaru Man. I love everything it has to offer. Is it a good game? It's fine. It's pretty good. It's fine. You know, is the multiplayer good? No. No. But like, is the music great? Yeah. Do I listen to it regularly, like when I drive to work? Yeah, absolutely. Like, if I listen to the Legendary theme on the right day, will it make me well up? Absolutely. I just think it's like one of the most beautiful songs ever written for games. And it's like all wrapped around a solid like 7 out of 10 game. So it's like, really just open your eyes up and don't ever deny anybody like the love of games. It's art.
Yes. Yeah. Well, 2 things for you. A, will you repeat the name of the store one more time for me?
Retro Taku. It's like a combination of retro and otaku.
Perfect.
Retro Taku.
Retro Taku. And then the second thing is, if you ever find yourself in the LA area, let me know, because I'd love to give you some recommendations on some retro stores out here. Because I love going. I go to retro stores, even if I'm not going to get a thing. I love to walk around and just peer my little eyeballs at goodies, at like, what UMDs do they have at this store, or what?
It's got to be different. I mean, LA is, you know, it's on the coast. Like, we're in the Midwest, so but we're fortunate where we're centered. We're near a town called Novi. Novi's got a very high Japanese population. It's like one of the densest Japanese populations in Michigan, I believe. Oh, wow. So we just have that proximity to a big Japanese population. And guess what they brought overseas with them? Their video games. So they sell their import video games to us. So we have a huge selection of import games, and we're just very, very lucky because of our location. So I imagine that like LA's probably got a pretty high density of like import games because of just its relation to where it is on the
Sure.
coast.
Yes.
But I'm sure the pricing may be different because it's like it's so readily available over there.
Yeah.
Generally nowadays though, like the party's over, so to speak, where everybody's kind of aware of like pricecharting.com, which is primarily what we use to price up like everything. For those who don't know, pricecharting.com is like a big aggregate website where it takes like private sales and eBay sales and like market data and it crunches it. And it gives you like one of the most accurate readouts for like what the current market value is for video games and comic books and trading cards and things like that. And that's what we use to price up like 99.9% of our stuff.
Yes.
We just punch it into price charting. It tells us what the market value is and we just price it like according to, you know, what we think it's going to move the needle or not.
Yeah. I wonder, I would assume that the stores that I go to use a similar methodology, if not the same website.
They must.
They must. But anyway, I've got some recs for you if you ever find yourself out here.
I have been trying to plan a trip out there. I do have, not only do I have family in the area, but I have some friends out in the area, including a chiptune / electronic artist, Snessi, who I'd like to shout out as well. It's Snesei.
I love it.
Yeah, great dude. If you ever catch him, I think he's in your neighborhood somewhere now. He just moved out there.
Oh, that's so funny.
No, I want to get out there. I want to check it out. Love to bring my camera with me, shoot the area.
You simply must. Well, Dan, that's so exciting. Thank you for sharing about yourself a little more. That was so fun, and for letting me dive in to a little bit more about your store life. Would you also like to plug your Twitch channel before I like move us to the next thing?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah. So, I'm fortunate enough to have the position at the shop, and I come across really exciting games like very often. So I'm over there getting high on my own supply. And then, I'm like, oh, this is a perfect opportunity to really share in like a lot of the games. Cause I try to scoop up really interesting stuff. I don't like to have like a boring collection. So I try to have unique and interesting games to pick from, because those are typically my favorites anyway. So I'm streaming very regularly.
Yeah.
You can find me. I'm, Hello Dan Lane on Twitch, as well as like I try to keep it consistent. So that's where you'll find me on my Instagram, YouTube as well. Possibly Blue Sky soon because of, reasons. Well,
I did search for you on Blue Sky when I was coming up with your intro.
I've got one. I just haven't like posted on it yet. I don't want to pivot because I have to start from zero. And as like a working artist nowadays, that's tough. Like trying to get your name out there. And there's a bit of automatic traction that happens just being a GameBoy Camera guy on the internet. Like luckily it's come back in a huge way. No, yeah, it's tough when you're just like, oh, a new platform pops up. How long is this going to stick around for? Should I even try?
There was like a good year and a half where I was posting on because I got on Blue Sky as soon as I could, just getting an invite from someone, and then I got like an account for all the shows we do. So as soon as I did that, I was basically double posting on both Twitter and Blue Sky at the same time, and then as of like pretty recently, just stopped posting on Twitter entirely. But also, there's definitely like people there who aren't at Blue Sky who don't know me, and like my followership is like completely different.
It's tough.
Pivoting
like, what do you do, man? What do you do?
Yeah. Well,
but
that's incredible.
I try to stream regularly. I'm there Monday,
Yes.
Wednesday, Fridays. Usually do 2 static games, so like one every Monday. I'll give one like a good shake, before moving on to the next one. But I've been doing more theme months, so
yes,
should tune in for that. We're doing a March movie madness where it's all movie tie-in games all March long. And that'll be really
so
fun.
good. Do you know?
Playing,
has there been like a highlight from that theme? I guess recently.
From any themage recently,
Or
the
from the
March is
movie
kicking
madness.
off. March is kicking off tomorrow.
Oh, I guess
as
March
we
2nd.
record this. But I know, like, so I was struggling with the date earlier, and I was like, this is so relatable because like Twitch is almost the only thing that's keeping me grounded to any sense of time nowadays.
Yes.
So I'm a single father, and I have like almost no time for games.
Yes.
But the Twitch thing's great because I'm like, oh, it's late at night. I usually do it after my kid's asleep or when she's with her mother. And it holds me accountable. Like it actually makes me play these games.
Yes.
If I tell people like I'm going to be on Twitch and I'm going to play these
Yes.
games, So it actually like forces me to carve out time to enjoy this hobby. So I've been trying to keep Twitch interesting just to make sure that it doesn't grind to a halt for me. But the March Movie Madness, we're playing Mad Max, which is a game I've never played.
Cool. I've heard that's a pretty good game too.
I take that back. I played an hour of it. It was offered up for free somewhere, I think, on PlayStation Plus or something. So I played it for a little bit and felt nothing when I like moved away for something else. You know what I mean? Something else came out and I'm like, I didn't pay for this game. I'm transitioning to this other one. So we'll be playing Mad Max. I'm going to give it a proper shake. We're also playing the Chronicles of Riddick: Escape from Butcher Bay, which is a game that I have played before, but I'll be replaying it for the first time since like 2007, dog.
Okay, cool.
That's a good one. Real good one. For those who haven't checked it out, it's so good it convinced me to buy a ticket to the last Riddick movie, which was not good.
They got you. Wow.
They got me. The game is great. And we're going to be playing that every Friday. And then every Wednesday is like a different game. And we're shaking it up all month.
Incredible. Well, I mean, both your channel, maybe even your store and your handles. I'm going to put a link to that stuff in the show notes so that people can go and give you a follow. Because we got to tune in to March Movie Madness in March.
Oh, please.
Which I now know is starting tomorrow, not before this, because it is now March 2nd.
I hate to break it to you. Yeah, we're in March. We're like a couple days into March.
Yes, I did turn to my girlfriend tonight while watching part of the Oscars and went, wait, it's March. I don't know how it snuck up on me.
What day is it?
Yeah,
truly. I feel like Rip Van Winkle somehow. I don't know how this is happening, but like every day I feel more like Matt McConaughey and True Detective, you know, just like crazier and crazier, less in touch with reality, but like okay with it.
Yes. Well, Dan, we're about to talk a little more and get like an overview on your history with games. Before we do that, we've teed it up a little bit, but will you introduce what you've brought on for the main event later and call me by your game?
Yes, I will do this. Yes, we're going to be talking about the GameBoy Camera.
Can't wait. This is going to be a very special episode for so many reasons. And one being that this is a unique, it's going to be one of those unique ones. I was telling you earlier that we've done some that have been, I might describe them as off the beaten path. I think the most unique one we ever did was we discussed Windows 95 and like an operating system.
Generally?
Well, it was more so to do with the games that were on it, but like Minesweeper and such. Like a connection my friend Anne had to her dad through that. So it was just really sweet. Anyway, I can't wait to talk about that, but I will. Dan, you kind of teed it up for us already as far as your history with games, going over to your neighbor's house and seeing the Gold Legend of Zelda cartridge.
Oh, yeah.
But what are some other... Where did you go from there, actually? I don't know if you had mentioned that.
Truly, well, all right. So that was, I think, like my earliest memory of gaming is truly like 4 or 5 years old, just like as early as I can think back. And then from there, it was just like, oh, I love them. You know, like I was probably already obsessed with television, and then just being like, oh, you can play games on them, and not only that, but games rule. So I just immediately would seek them out wherever I was, and there was just a lot in my orbit where it's like I remember the place that we would go to get my hair cut had a Super Nintendo hooked up to the TV in the waiting room, and they would have like Mario World and stuff like that. So it was like anytime it was stuff like that. And anytime we'd go to Pizza Hut or whatever, it'd be like, all right, they got games at Pizza Hut. So I know to bring some change so I can play these games. Like it's just always been a part of like my identity. You know, once like the internet popped off, so to speak, if I could like really, really date myself, and like Kazaa and LimeWire and all this stuff, like ways that you could suddenly get music from the games. Once that entered my life, like things changed where I'm like, great, now I can put these like on CDs and MP3 players, and I can like, because you know, it was difficult. You didn't have people who would have these full soundtrack rips just available on YouTube. Like I think a lot of people take that for granted. You used to have to like really, really work to find like media and stuff orbiting, or just stuff directly from the game, like good rips of songs from games if you wanted to listen to that stuff outside of playing the game. But I've always been into it. It's even like in college, when I was more musically inclined, I lived with a bunch of bands, and I lived in this like shitty punk house.
Sick.
in Auburn Hills, and we would have shows every weekend, and we would have these after parties where I would do these hard noise sets, and the middle of my set was a Game Boy, because I had this little program called LSDJ, Little Sound DJ.
Okay.
And it's a little cartridge. You used to be able to buy them physically. I don't think you can anymore, but it was a little physical Game Boy cartridge, and it's just a sequencer and like music writing device, and it's just what people would use, in like developer settings to write songs for games. And it was just something that I would tool around with, and it would make the most radical, like crazy sounds, because it's all the Game Boy chip, which is like a highly advanced chip for its time.
Yes.
Really good sound comes out of it. But it's just, I don't know, something about games and gaming of just, it always like hits me in the exact right pleasure center. I've always loved them, always seek them out. Loved them so much they nearly failed me out of high school when I was addicted to Ragnarok Online and Final Fantasy 11. I was a white mage, Taru. I was loved and needed by my guild, and I could not let them down. And that means that sometimes I wasn't turning in assignments.
That is incredible.
But no, I don't know, just always loved them. And then now I work for Retrotaku, and it's my bread and butter, and it's great. People are always like, the customers will come in talking about some game, and it's always so exciting to see them get excited when they walk in through the door, because that nostalgia hit, like Don Draper says, where he's like, it's potent nostalgia. Yes. People come in and they just turn into children. It's so fun. And it's like, you see it happen to everybody. It's the exact same reaction where they'll just be like stone faced walking around the store, and then they see something that they had or wanted or like really coveted or only played once, and it like has stuck with them on the tip of their tongue their whole life.
Totally.
And they see it and just explode with joy. Like people will shout, and there'll just be like little pockets of shouts that come throughout and it's so fun. It like never gets old. So
that's really sweet.
I don't know. It's very fun.
I've had like experienced sensations like that at retro video game stores, whether it be something that has a little bit less of a connection for me, where, for an example, like just pointing at a game and saying, oh, I heard about this last week on this YouTube channel. It seems awesome. Or that's a game that I didn't even remembered existed, because I just seeing the cover has like reminded me of a memory I have of it growing up, almost like a fever dream.
It's the meme of the chef from Ratatouille that like gets pulled away from the table and reverted back to a child. No, it's really exciting. And then just and then there's also the side excitement where like I get to be like the quote unquote like cutthroat guy behind the counter that's like, buying everybody's goods and things like that, and that's all really fascinating. Before I worked there, I actually managed a comic book shop, and I would describe the behavior as like identical. You know what I mean? It's like that collector mindset, and it's so fascinating to me. It's always been fascinating to me, because I share in it a little bit, but then I get to watch people who have like gone to the dark side of it. And they are the people that I encounter the most, because there's money to be made in video games. So, I touched up on the dark side of video games, talking about how they nearly like ended my academic career. It's like I had a moment where I was like, I need to rethink my relationship with games. And then I get to watch these people who are generations older than me behaving in these like insane ways sometimes. And it's usually over like loose copies of Assassin's Creed, stuff where I'm like, I can't give these away, let alone offer you more than like $1 or $2 for this.
Yes.
But because there's money involved, like emotions get high, stuff gets heated really fast. We've had to like throw people out of the store because they just get belligerent because money's involved. I don't know, like it adds like a danger, I guess, to video games.
Sure, yeah. It's there's a little bit of heat in the store when you're running through a situation like that.
Truly.
I've thankfully never, in all my hours spent in retro stores, I have not observed anything like that. But you'll observe all sorts of characters, whether it's someone just like me or someone very different. And I can very easily imagine something like that happening. Yeah. So
most people are chill. Most people are just down to play games, and that's where all the excitement comes. But I do like it. There's like, it's just fascinating to view people in that element, I guess, because at the end of the day, it's like we are just talking about video games.
Totally. Unrelated, I have several good friends who are from, not Detroit itself, but the like suburbs of Detroit and the greater Michigan area, and who are gamers. So I'm gonna let them know about your store and be like, hey,
a lot
of
Michiganders I know ran to LA. I know a couple myself.
Yes. Oh, you said you went to college. Did you go to school in Michigan? Is that how you made it out to the state, or?
I mean, without like doxing too much about my history, like
Sure.
my family moved around a lot. Eventually, we settled in Michigan. And then that's where I went to like high school and college. And then I've lived here the longest that I've lived anywhere.
Okay.
Oh man, Chicago. We got to talk about Chicago. So big. So like. Yeah, no, I mean, like, I really would seek out games just as much as possible. And when we lived in Chicago, we lived there when Disney Quest was open. Have you ever discussed Disney Quest on your show?
Not once. What is this thing?
What is Disney Quest? Is this the question that you were asking me tonight?
Question.
Okay. I'm so happy to tell you about Disney Quest.
I want to say I'm not even loosely familiar.
All right, so Disney Quest was Disney's attempt at an arcade. They wanted to do like this giant arcade experience, but like too little too late. They tried to do it when arcades were kind of on their way out.
Yes.
I think their goal was kind of Nintendo adjacent, where they're like, oh, we'll scoop up all this stuff while like the market's going down, and then we'll give it like the Disney edge, and everybody will come back, and nobody came back.
Wow.
But there were two locations. I believe there's one in Florida, but there was one in Chicago. So I lived in a suburb of Chicago called Gurnee, which is by the Six Flags.
Okay.
Which is also where that Funko Land I mentioned earlier was, the one I terrorized like daily, where that one was too. But we used to take the train into the city, and then we would walk up to Disney Quest, and you could buy all-day passes. It was like one of the first places I remember having cards as like currency. So you would either put a certain amount of time or money on it, or you can get an all-day pass for something like $30. But this was before they had any kind of regulations on like how often you could use the cards.
Okay.
So we would go there, and we were just such little arcade rats. We would go there and we would just stand by the machines and just like scan the card all day long, just dumping, maxing out the tokens.
Yes.
Because there was no limit to it. And probably why Disney Quest failed. But they had a bunch of like really interesting stuff. It was like 3 or 4 floors of like arcades and like blacklight VR stuff. They had this like early VR Aladdin's Ride game. Oh, this is such a wormhole you need to go down.
Yes.
But it was like the thing. I remember when Disney Quest was opening, it was like, gotta find a way to get to Disney Quest. So like I took up a summer job mowing lawns to buy train tickets to go to the city. I'm like, this is crazy. You know, I'm like in middle school, I think at the time, trying to like convince my parents to drive me to the city so I can check out this new arcade, and they won't. So I had to like take matters into my own hands.
Oh my.
I'm sick.
This is going to be like if YouTube doesn't immediately suggest it to me, I'm going to be typing it in probably tonight to check out this wonder.
I think there's a good Defunct Land about it. I think there's a really good one.
I was just going to say,
it was a whole thing. I'm pretty sure
there
is. It was a whole thing. But that was where I cut my teeth on like Marvel vs. Capcom 2.
Yes.
They had a bunch of cabinets there, and we used to get like, and it was funny. I learned this in like Delaware, like that arcade culture of riling people up and like gathering them in almost like a Barker, you know, where you're like, come on in, like we're doing a big tournament, and then like ordering people around, like you're fighting this guy and you're doing this just for the love of the game. And of course, we would just be sitting there like maxing out all the games and telling everybody that it was like everything on this row we've maxed out. All these games are free. Like don't tell the Disney Quest bouncers that we've done this. Like try to have these weird underground like arcade clubs. And it's cool. Yeah, I don't know. Like just I love games, and I love like the art and the artistry of games the most. I think because so much of that gets dumped into every game. Jumping back to my earlier statement of like when people don't view it as an art form, it's like I feel that's so ignorant because so much art gets poured into the game in order for it to exist in the first place.
Yes.
So how could you discredit any of that?
Yeah, and not that it's a competition or that you can actually quantify it, but even it's
tough
like
to judge.
It's more art than some art is because you're also adding in at least a whole gameplay element on top of all of the writing and sound. And Yeah.
And it's interactive. So you see people make those tough decisions at work, where they're trying to trade in a copy of, say, Chrono Trigger because it takes big bucks. But I see them like it's like Lord of the Rings, and they're like, it weighs a ton in their hand, and they're just like, I don't want to do this.
Yes.
And like, so I've seen people shake handing me like games where they're just like, I don't want to be doing this. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, it's work,
Yeah, truly.
And then those games go home with me.
Yeah, yes. This has been so much fun already, just to uncover things that we've never even discussed on the podcast, not just because they're from your unique experience, but because there are literally things I'm learning on this episode already, and will probably continue to do so. I have a couple very vanilla questions to ask you about your history with gaming before we leave this segment. The first of which is, what is the first piece of like video game hardware or software you ever had? Did you get a console? Did you get a game? Did you have a peripheral? Do you know what this was?
We were a Genesis family.
Okay.
So I think everybody else I knew, all my friends had Nintendo stuff, and which is why we had the Genesis. And it's like, as a parent, I'm like, that all makes sense. I totally understand my parents' point of view now as a parent myself. However, child me was like, this sucks. Like all I wanted were the Nintendo games because they were so much more memorable. But Genesis had a lot of really rad stuff on it. It's like where my love of Sonic comes from. Obviously, It's like you can't not love Sonic and own a Genesis. But yeah, the Genesis was the first one that we properly owned, and the first like I coveted Nintendo stuff so bad.
Yes.
The first Nintendo product that I owned was a Game Boy Pocket.
Okay, what color?
Red.
Red, classic.
Yep. I got it for Christmas, and I got it with a copy of Pokemon Red, which I had never heard of.
No way.
Never heard of well, because this is like 1997 or 8 or whatever when this came out. So this is in a time when like I'm just readily online, being like, time to go online and see what video game news waits me. Like nothing was there. It was such a niche thing to be reported on, and we didn't get any of the gaming magazines or anything. Like we weren't that fortunate growing up to have those. But I would hear about it from my friends who did have it. So things would just fall right by us. But I remember opening it and just being like, oh, it's a Game Boy game, and it's also red, like my Game Boy. But what is Pokemon? And my mom just goes, I don't know. They said it was really popular. I'm like, I'll give it a shot. I'll let you know how it is. So I like walked into Pokemon just being like, don't know what this is. Have no idea what awaits me. Let's fire it up and see what Game Boy game Mom got me for Christmas. And then 3 months later, I'm like, I can't stop playing Pokemon Red. Oh my God. Like totally blew, like it's one of my favorite gaming experiences, period, is just like that. I think that like really solidified my love of Nintendo, especially is just being like, oh, I finally got a Game Boy. Oh, and a cute game that matches my Game Boy. And then it's like blew my head clean off my shoulders. And what amazing experience awaited me.
Dude, that was such a powerful time for someone who had a very similar experience. But I love hearing that you literally didn't come in with any notions about it or idea. That's how I felt like when I went to see the movie Napoleon Dynamite in junior high. I was like the only one who had never seen a trailer for it.
Also went in blind to Napoleon Dynamite. My girlfriend at the time made me go see it. She's like, I saw a trailer. It looks funny. She had no way of showing it to me. So I'm like, what is this?
Yes. It blew my mind. It was like I was hit by a train when I saw that movie. I was so inspired. I was so tickled. And so I'm just imagining walking into the titan of an experience like the original Pokemon first generation, and what that
felt
must
like
have
an
been
endless game. It just like not knowing and I didn't play a lot of RPGs either. Like I probably had played a couple at the time, but like had probably never stuck any out to the end. I probably didn't have the attention span of being that young. But having the Game Boy Pocket, I could like carry it with me, and that alone was just like, oh, this changes everything. I can just like throw it in my back pocket, throw it in my backpack or whatever. And then bringing it to school and having all my friends also playing it, where it's like, did you get here yet? Oh no. Or like, I caught this Pokemon that you were looking for. I can get it to you. Like, bring your cable tomorrow. We'll all trade up Pokemon. Or like, organizing who's going to bring the link cable in when, so we could all trade up to get our Gengars and things.
Yes.
It's like, you have to trade them to get a Gengar or a Golem, dude. You got to bring in that link cable.
Dude,
like
okay.
little addicts. We're like crowded around the corner of the schoolyard being like, where'd you get in Pokemon last night, dude?
There's like I have so many things that happen in my life or little experiences that remind me how much I think I'm the center of the universe. One of those being that we were like the perfect age when Pokemon was not just a phenomenon, but when it arrived. There was something I think we were lucky to experience the first time that hit and when it changed everything. So I'm so fond of that. I'm sorry to make this about myself a little bit, but I do want to. I'm going to plug a series that we've done before. About a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago now, we covered the original generation, Red, Blue, and Yellow, on a 14-part Games Club series. It's in our Super NPC Games Club feed. I recommend you go find it because you're going to hear so much of this similar nostalgia and excitement. So it's one of the best series we've ever done. Anyway, I think that all just stemmed from me asking you what the first console you got was, and that got us all the way to your Game Boy Pocket and your Pokemon Red copy. That's incredible.
Yep.
Another question I want to ask you is, if you had to pick, and maybe it's something we've already sort of just discussed, do you have a console that you look back with like the most fondness for?
See, that is where it becomes just very, very difficult for me to answer.
Yes.
Like, it's the same with movies and music and books, where depending on when you catch me, what's going on, like what mood I'm in, just there are a lot of factors that go into the way that I intake and enjoy these things.
Absolutely.
So there will be times where I'm like, I'm all about this type of game, or I'm all about this system. I'm also very like ADHD minded, so it's usually like whatever the current like hot shiny object for me to obsess over is. Recently it's been the Sega Saturn, because I finally got one. Haven't had one in my collection until recently, so I'm like fully Saturn pilled right now.
That's a gorgeous console that
I'm extremely excited.
I will probably never own a Saturn, but like the idea of it is so alluring to me. Has there been any striking experiences for you since you've gotten that?
I'll be exploring them soon. I'm gonna bust it out for stream in the next couple of weeks, I think. But I'm not much of like I like some fighting games, but I'm rubbish at remembering combos. Like, especially if it's like every character has a different set of combos. Smash Bros is the perfect fighting game for me because it is idiot proof. I like things that are idiot proof. Like, I understand thing plug into thing, make thing work. But if I have to like go into something and get into the nitty gritty, like program something out or memorize like a button input that's specific to certain character types, it's like, that's where I just fall off as a gamer. My brain doesn't work that way. Because it's more about feeling for me. But the fighting games on Saturn are like that kind of simple early-ish 90s era, like Virtua Fighter 2 and Fighting Vipers, which is, if you don't know, Fighting Vipers is fun. It's like Virtua Fighter, but they specifically made it to be targeted at a US audience. So it plays exactly the same as Virtua Fighter.
Yes.
But the characters are like, there's like a kid with a skateboard. There's like this woman from the military who's like shredded. And her name is Jane, and her name is like an army stamped like Jane. But it's just like this crazy game where they're like, I don't know, the US is just all like delinquents and stuff. They'll eat this garbage up.
Yes.
But it's a really fun game. It plays just like Virtua Fighter, but it has this knockaway mechanic where you can charge like a smash attack, like in Smash Bros, and you will hit your opponent and it sends them flying across the arena. So you can like smash them into walls like are Dead or Alive.
Yes.
Or at the end of matches when the walls are weak, you can just send them through the wall.
Okay, cool.
And it's so satisfying when you like come back with just this like powerful strike that knocks them through like an iron gate that like shatters into pieces. It's all very simple gameplay, but yeah, so I've been all about the Sega. Actually, I've been very Sega pilled lately. That and the Dreamcast. Something about the Dreamcast is super duper special for me too.
Yes,
I love the Dreamcast.
Another console I never owned, but I borrowed from a friend almost a couple years ago and play. It was mostly just to play Sonic Adventure.
Baby.
But we played some Power Stone. We played some Marvel vs. Capcom 2. That may have been it, but what a wonder that is.
The Dreamcast truly dared to dream. Like,
it sure did.
It, like Icarus, just flew too close to the sun.
Yes.
I love it. It's just like, it's a console that nobody said no to. You know what I mean? Like the games, like Seaman.
Yeah, yeah.
No one was there to edit or say no to Seaman. Typing of the Dead, like, I love it.
Truly.
Typing of the Dead, one of my favorite games.
Incredible. Which you have to have I'm assuming a keyboard to play that game.
I do. Not all. I've got 2.
Incredible.
I got 2, both of which came through the doors of my shop.
There we go. I have one final question for you before we head to break, and that is, before we do so, is there an experience, whether it be a game, a moment that is a part of your history that you want to make sure you shout out before, whether it's something that was meaningful to you or just like an absolute wonder that you did gaming wise?
Like me personally, like a personal achievement, or do I like a personal achievement in gaming that I wish more people would experience?
Doesn't even need to be an achievement. It could be like, oh my gosh, if I don't talk about this game on this episode, let's just say that. Then it could be something like that too.
I'll save most of my gushing for the Game Boy Camera because that's what I'm here for. But no, I mean, I shouted out Guitar Man earlier. Like, the problem is that a lot of these games are difficult to come by if you're looking to have legitimate copies of them.
Yes.
Unfortunately, Guitar Man is like a cult classic game, so it's difficult to come by. So do what you got to do. Like, this is your blessing from somebody who works in the industry, where it's like things have gotten crazy. You know, it's now a collector's game, so if you're serious, like, look for it. But yeah, Guitar Man is great, but if you got to emulate it, do what you got to do. Guitar Man I love. Typing of the Dead I also love. Yes. I feel like that's just like a really, really accessible game. These are all like things where it's like, just try those weird like off the beaten path games.
Yes.
What have Shenmue. Can I talk about Shenmue?
Please.
God, so I recently did a 2-month-long playthrough of Shenmue on my stream. I just wrapped it up Friday before we recorded.
Yes.
I think people should try Shenmue more. I think people should play Shenmue. I think if you're interested in the Dreamcast, I think you should play Shenmue. I think it's a necessity. It is a beautiful experience. I have only had a little bit of it, like way back in the day, and I gave it my first proper playthrough, and it was glorious.
Oh my gosh.
It's that perfect 2000 era, like, crunchy audio throughout. The vibes are immaculate. It's really accessible. Like, it's a martial arts epic that plays like a life sim with a heavy emphasis on the life simulator. And without it, we wouldn't have games like Yakuza. Like, it's very important for games like Yakuza. But it is just such a bizarre experience. Like, really, really, really bizarre game.
I love that. It's so weird, since I've made gaming more of a part of my life, the amount of titles or franchises that I'm aware of and can imagine, but have never even sniffed. So,
well, they're all part of the zeitgeist.
Yeah, that's really the reason. But even hearing you talk so affectionately about it, it almost bumps it up like a few percentage points, the likelihood that I'll touch it when I hear someone discuss it like this. I
fall victim to that all the time. Yeah. It's so tough at the shop because people get real heated and they love talking about a game, and all I can think of is just like, oh, I'm gonna go home and play that game they were talking about. Like, that sounds awesome.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Dan, for not just talking about Shenmue and Disney Quest, I believe it was called, and
Disney Quest,
diving into your, just what I'm sure is just a small snapshot of your history with gaming. This has been a blast. We are going to go ahead and take our break on the episode, but when we come back, we'll finally get into all things about the Game Boy Camera. So, Dan, I'll see you on the other side. Welcome back to Call Me By Your Game. Connor McCabe still here with my guest Dan Lane to finally discuss the Game Boy Camera. Dan, welcome back.
Oh my gosh. It's time. It's time to talk about the Game Boy Camera.
It is. We've eaten our veggies. We've done our homework, and now here comes dessert. Who's to say the main event? Like I told you before, Dan, I'm gonna do some brief table setting for this device. For the listener, they're probably familiar, or maybe they're not, or maybe they're gonna learn a few things about it that they didn't know today.
Who knows?
So this is just a brief overview of what the thing was. If you want to interject at some point, or at the end, if you want to add on anything that you think is important contextually before we dive into your experience with it, you've got the green light, pal.
Alrighty.
But without further ado, I'll kick us off. The Game Boy Camera is a photography peripheral for the Game Boy family of systems and was developed by Nintendo R&D1, which is research and development. It was released on February 21st, 1998, first in Japan, and manufacturing ceased in late 2002. As a toy for user-generated content, it can be used to shoot grayscale photos, edit them, or create original drawings, and transfer images between Game Boy Color or Game Boy Pocket, or really any Game Boy units, or to the 64DD Art Game Suite Mario Artist. Again, that was Japan only as well. We didn't have the DD here in NTSC region. It could be used in conjunction with the Game Boy printer as well to print photographs. The accessory featured a 180-degree swivel front-facing camera that allowed users to capture selfies. Its images can be printed to thermal paper with the printer, and the Game Boy Camera's cartridge contains mini-games based on Nintendo's early games, such as the arcade video game Space Fever and the Game & Watch handheld game Ball, and includes a chiptune music sequencer. Photographers have embraced its technological limitations as artistic challenges. The only thing I also wanted to include was something that I found in doing research about the Game Boy Camera today, but could not actually find like an article to substantiate the claim on the Wikipedia page. So maybe you can fill us in, Dan. Is it true that there was an alleged planned follow-up to the Game Boy Camera for the Game Boy Advance called the Game Eye?
Yes.
Okay.
Or at least that's the rumor.
Yes.
I'm only an enthusiast, but yeah, I heard that was the plan. Yeah, that they wanted to do like a full color one for the Game Boy Advance, and it just never came. There was eventually one for the Game Boy Advance. It wasn't made by Nintendo. It was some third-party thing.
I see. Okay,
and then,
gotcha.
And then we see some other cameras, and like the PSP had a camera, and
yes,
and then of course like the DS and the 3DS had cameras built in as well.
Yes. Also, before I really flip it to you, I want to show you my Game Boy Camera.
He's got his.
I've got it hooked up to my Game Boy Color, my turquoise
you got a
Game
green
Boy
one
Color
too. Nice.
So it's a green. Is yours green as well?
Tell you what, this is a great time, again, to tease anybody who's listening audio only, because this is going to be a very, very visual thing here. I've got a green one. I've got all of them, baby.
Oh, you have the Ocarina of Time gold one?
I've even got the gold limited edition Ocarina of Time. That bad boy right there. I've got it. I've got those. I've even got the Atomic Purple Japanese one. I've got all the Japanese ones.
Dan.
I love the Game Boy Camera.
This is amazing. You just gave a nice close-up for the listeners on YouTube, and I'll show mine here. It's got I talked about the 180-degree swivel point, so you can actually turn this bad boy around and take selfies if you want. I'm sure they weren't even called that back then.
No, they were. World's first selfie camera.
No way.
That's what they called it. The world's first selfie camera.
That is absolutely incredible.
Not only that, are you ready for another visual treat here?
Oh, treat me.
The world's first selfie camera, and also, let me see if I can find it. Here it is. Guinness Book of World Records, world's smallest digital camera, 1999. There is the listing from the Guinness Book of World Record where they talk about the Game Boy Camera and like what its guts are, and that it sold 60 million units so far and whatnot. But yeah, in 1999, it was officially recognized, at least by Guinness, that it was the world's smallest digital camera. And truly it is. It's like such a tiny form factor for the time. My family had a digital camera at the same time that we had this one, and it took floppy disks. like full-blown floppy. It was huge. It was, I don't know, about the size of like a small bento box, but it was big enough to fit a floppy disk in it. And then this shows up. I'm like, oh my God.
Yes.
Incredible.
We're whetting the appetite so much. Before we dive into even more of like your history with this device, Dan, are there any bullet points of context that you think we should include before we do that?
Well, yeah, you touched up on a lot of the stuff that I was going to, and even when manufacturing stopped. I see you read a lot of the same articles I did before we started. No, some of the big names that were involved in development of the Game Boy Camera were some heavy hitters like Gunpei Yokoi.
Incredible.
So like big heavy hitter there. He developed, the Game & Watch, Virtual Boy. He also developed the Wonder Swan, the Game Boy proper. And he's responsible for the cross-shaped pad, like the D-pad. Like,
yes,
huge guy. So this was kind of kickstarted by him as a passion project in like 2007, I believe, like not too long before his death, because he died before the Wonder Swan was even released as well.
Yeah, I want to say it's like a bus accident, like something like that. Yeah,
traffic accident of some kind. But yeah, he started that in 2007. Then the program was passed off to Nintendo R&D 1, which is kind of like Nintendo's main research crew there. They do like a bulk of the heavy hitter, like mainstay games, where it landed in Hirokazu Tanaka, or Chip Tanaka's lap. So Chip Tanaka is like an idol of mine. I love Chip. I love his music. I love his design philosophy. Like also Yokoi a little bit too, where it's kind of like reductive lateral thinking. I can't remember. It's something like lateral knowledge or something. He has like a specific term for it that he uses. Obviously I love like minimalism because the camera is nothing but a minimalist device.
Yes.
But I do think that reduction helps in the creative process, where it's really just like, okay, things are too complicated. Start taking stuff out and reduce it to its most barest roots. Like some of my most favorite games are games that do that, where they're like, what's the thing that makes this game special? Focus on that thing. Or like Shadow of the Colossus, for an example, where it was like supposed to have 50 plus colossi, and they're like, I'm going to strip it down to like 16, make it real streamlined, take everything out. And it's such a huge thing. I think when designing stuff like this, because this came out in 98, so nearly 30 years later, it's still kicking. It's got this second life, like randomly came back up. I think the pandemic had a lot to do with its success, and we could talk about that in a little bit. That's kind of where like my origin story for like my career as a funtographer comes from.
Oh my goodness.
But no, Tanaka, Yokoi, and then another gentleman, Masato Kuwahara, who I'm not super duper familiar with. I know he worked on the DSi and the DSi XL.
Okay.
So those are like the three, pardon me, who helped develop the Game Boy Camera, and it was struggling to get ground at Nintendo. Like initially nobody liked it.
Yeah.
And they just thought it was an annoying project. Then Masato encouraged Tanaka's involvement, and Tanaka at the time had kind of begun to jump ship from Nintendo to Creatures Inc., who was involved with Game Freak, who was involved with Pokemon, and then like what's fascinating about that, I think, is there's like stamps right in the Game Boy Camera that you can stamp on top of images, and some of them are Pokemon stamps. So without Game Freak's like involvement, we wouldn't have the Game Boy Camera at all. And then conversely, without the Game Boy Camera, Chip Tanaka wouldn't have been so heavily introduced to Game Freak. That man eventually went on to become president of Creatures Incorporated. And he's now like creative fellow or whatever. Like he's eternally on the board of Pokemon. And I think it has everything to do with the Game Boy Camera. And it's it's like this weird little bridge of Nintendo history.
Yeah.
That has got this second life in the year of our Lord 2025. Hell, it started coming back around like 2016, I think.
Yeah.
Like when it really started popping off online again.
Yeah, not only is it an absolutely fascinating creative device, but you're bringing up the fact that it itself was like an inflection point with Nintendo and Pokemon's history. And just to think even how influential just the Pokemon brand and series has been, that is waves that was created from this thing. That's so cool. Well, Dan, the first thing I think I want to ask you then is when did this thing come across your vision for the first time? Do you remember this growing up? Is it a later in life thing?
I had not heard about it until Mom got it for me for my birthday.
Mom MVP.
I know. She's crushing it. Big shout out. Thank you so much, Aeon. I owe a lot to her. But no, she was very sweet, very supportive of my video game hobby. Like, did not turn her nose up at the fact that I would spend so much time like just absorbed in games. Not the typical like you need to go outside. She would do her fair share of that, of course, but
sure,
just not the token like, waggling your finger like
I'll rot your
anti-video
brain.
game mom. No, she was always very supportive of it. But no, she again just went to a Toys R Us, I think, and just asked them like what were the big sellers, like what was really popular with Game Boy owners, and they were like, well, it launched in June, my birthday's in June, so like this thing just came out, it's a camera for the Game Boy, and I already had this interest in photography. I like shooting on like instant film, like I like disposable cameras, I like 35 millimeter, and I like instant like Polaroids and things like that.
Yeah.
Again, the more idiot proof, the better. And I think that a lot of that also, because there's less interaction between you and the final product, sometimes there are unexpected results, and that a lot of fun comes out of that. Like most of the excitement that I get through the Game Boy Camera is when editing my pictures, I'll look and just be like completely gobsmacked at how much detail actually comes through on such a restrictive device.
Yes.
Like, for example, in what we're displaying here, like a lot of the folds in my clothing come through like pretty well for something that's such low resolution. And it's a lot of inferred detail and dithering, like the kind of pixely mess that's happening, like especially over in the corner here where like my hand is. That's all in processor, and a lot I have no control over it. It's interpreting that shade as that kind of dither to interpret like the light that's in that area. But a lot of the results that come through when you look at it, you're just like, wow, I am amazed. Like I can see every detail and yet can't at the same time. It's this interesting conundrum.
Yes, it's beyond like a novelty when I look at a Game Boy Camera photo. Like there is something so special about. This is going to be the most simplistic expression of sort of admiration for the thing, because this is something that I'm not the first to ever say it, but there's something so charming about the result and the way that you're saying, the camera and the processor will interpret the image. And I don't even have a nostalgia for it, but when I got my thing, Dan, I got it at one of my retro stores. Shout out Game Realms in Burbank, California.
Support local. Support your local friendly game shop.
I saw this there, and I don't know what it was, but I was just struck, and it was cheap, and I went home with it. It still has the label from the store on it as well. But this bad boy, it's
very visually interesting, just like as a cartridge itself.
Yes.
It's very sleek, but then it has this huge eye.
Yes.
Like just this very attention-grabbing eye. I suppose that's what you want with a camera. Like, you want to grab someone's attention. It's like, look, it's a giant eyeball.
Absolutely. I'll wrap up my little thing before I, pivot to why we're here, which is actually hearing from you, the guest, and just say that the week I got this, I also happened to have like a fighting game night at my apartment, and took a portrait of almost everyone there, and took a screenshot from my computer from a capture card, and it was just really special. And everyone was also there's so much that's special about it. I'll pivot back to you. I'm sorry to interrupt. You had this as a kid, is where we were.
So I got it. When would that have put it? I believe I got it when I was 12. I think I got it 19. I actually think I got it the year after it came out.
Okay.
I think I was 12. But either way. That tracks.
Okay.
But I got it, and then she was just like, "You like cameras? Here you go. You know, you like games, you like cameras. Give it a shot." And I just immediately fell in love with it. It is such an interesting device because it really opens up exploration. Like, it's so strange, and I can in a little bit show off like some of the in-game menu. I'm all set up to do that too.
Ooh.
But like everything about the way it's laid out is weird. All the art is weird. The music is like very interesting, very unique and weird. Just everything about it is so visually arresting. Like, the audio is arresting, and it really encourages you to just kind of sit and experience like photography with this strange little device.
Yes. Not only is there far more to it than I think one could guess by just hearing the name of the device, but it is like peculiar in a charming way, the way that they did go about sort of like coloring this experience with what they included, kind of like you're saying. It's a lot of me just echoing the crap the stuff you're sharing, but I am fascinated by it too. That is incredible. Do you still have your original? Are the ones that you have today just ones you rebought?
Yeah,
I'm assuming?
So I do still have my original. This red one is my main shooter. That's the one I got.
Had to with your red Game Boy Pocket.
Yep. Yeah, the most recent one that I picked up is the gold one. That gold one's really special, actually, like super duper special. I have a fun story about that. Should we just segue into a fun story about the gold Game Boy Camera?
I would love to, yes.
So the gold Game Boy Camera was a white whale in my collection. I was just like, I'd be sitting there stewing at night, just like, it will be mine someday. It will, with thunder clapping in the background and all. And it was just so hard to track down. And whenever I did find it, it would always be in worse condition. Because I also like my things to be in nice condition. Like, I use the things that I own, but I do take good care of them. So it's like, as long as they begin in good condition, I know I will maintain that good condition. Very responsible game owner.
Yes.
So I'd find these cameras and I'd be like, like, how much do you want for this? And it'd always be like $1,000+.
Oh,
easily,
my.
just without blinking an eye, just like easily over $1,000. And it's like, but it is so beaten up. Like, the label isn't on the back, scratched to pieces. Who knows if it, like, what the inside looks like. I'm not in a position where I can open it up and look.
Sure, yes.
So just never was in a position to get one. And just the more time passed, the more expensive I would watch it get.
Ugh.
And then the pandemic happened. And that's when video game prices exploded, just completely exploded. And so I was like, I'm never going to find this thing. But I will always keep my eye out for it, because you never know. And I feel like I used up all of my karma, because pretty shortly after that, somebody on eBay listed one and had a pretty low like starting offer. So I'm like, okay. They want people to start in low and then drive it up high. So I'm like, I'm going to try to get in and hope that nobody is shopping for this thing. Maybe I can scoop it up low. And I'm reading the guy's thing, his listing. He's saying that it's in great shape. He's got plenty of pictures of it. So I see it from every angle. It's in beautiful condition. And then he goes on in the listing to say, it's very important to me that if anybody knows how to remove the images from the camera, that you do so, because I have images of my deceased mother on here and I don't want to lose them.
Oh,
and
my.
Like, I drop everything, and like a psycho, I'm like all caps emailing this guy like, this is what I can help you. I have a very specific set of skills that can only be used in this scenario. So I implore him that I'm like, I really want to buy this thing off of you, but I just simply can't pay what they're worth.
Yes.
I can give you a lot, but just not what it's worth. And but I promise you that I can get these photos off.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, so send me what you can. And I send it. And it was like low. Got so like a lot lower than I wanted to, because this guy was so sweet. But he accepted it and sent it my way. And not only did he have these like beautiful pictures of his mother, really like from somebody who appreciates this, like as an art form, somebody who is shooting regularly on the camera, I'm like, these are really well done. They're like framed very well. Like everything just was great. It was clear as day, photos of his mother. And I was like, wow, these are really beautiful. And then I'm scrolling through this stranger's images, and then he has pictures of him at summer camp that year.
Oh my.
And I'm just looking through and I'm like, this is incredible. Like, I get to see this cool kind of snapshot of this guy's life. And when I send him all the images back, he, first of all, is like, oh, I can't believe, I thought I'd never see these images again. But then he's like, I forgot about this fucking summer camp I went to. And like, there's a picture of like a porno magazine that him and his friends must have found like under a bunk. And I was like, God, all these images are so special.
Yes.
And it's like, and I was like, I'm so happy to have like helped you do this. And big shout out to Luke in Florida who sold me his Game Boy Camera.
Luke,
like,
it tells such a story.
Luke is, and that was the last one. I was like, I had every single other one but the gold one. And I was like, if I can't find it, c'est la vie, that's game collecting. That's an expensive baby, but it just, again, I feel like I used up all my karma on it. But now I have it. And the only difference between it and the other ones is it has Zelda stamps in it, and it's gold.
Yes, I understand too that it was like you could only order it through like Nintendo Power.
Yes, you could only order it through Nintendo Power. You could only order it through stuff like this. So this is one of the ads from Nintendo Power. Here's another ad. But yeah, you could only get it through mail order from Nintendo Power. So everyone that you see in the wild is there are no complete in-box gold cameras because there was simply never a box to go with it. It was just mailed to you in a mailer.
Dude, even that hat that you showed with the
there
little
was some clutch
Triforce
stuff in
decal.
that. Seriously, look at this stuff. Like this hat with the little emblem on it. That's dope as hell.
That's incredible.
Is that a mouse pad down there? It's pretty cool too.
Yes. Oh man, that was unfortunately.
Games are fun, aren't they?
They really are. Right before I was a Nintendo Power subscriber, I believe that happened in 1999 is when I hopped aboard the old train for a little while.
Bummer. Could have gotten yourself a gold camera.
And hey, I could have been Luke from Florida asking you to take photos off my... When you were telling that story at first, Dan, I thought you meant that... You thought you were saying that Luke had these photos of his mom that he wanted erased. You meant that you were pulling them to like show him.
Yeah, preserve them. So up until recently, the only way that you were able to get the images off of the camera was with the Game Boy printer.
Yes.
Which I have now. I didn't have one at the time.
Okay.
Which also made the camera kind of mystical and magical in my eyes because it only holds 30 images at a time and I had no way to remove them. So I would take these images and sometimes just kind of sit with them for like weeks or months just being like, well, I don't want to delete these images. These are great images. But then after a while, you have to clear up space. So just that impermanence like kind of helped form me as a person where it's like these things are special and I'll sort of maybe still have the memory of them, but like, kind of taught me to move on from certain scenarios. I don't know how to describe that, but recently as of 2016, 18, something like that, there was a gentleman named Alex Barr who made something called the Bit Boy. And that's what I use. So this little black box here.
Oh.
It's nondescript black box is a Bit Boy. So this is does what the printer does. So you connect it to a link cable.
Yes.
And then it takes your images and it dumps it onto an SD card.
Oh.
So instead of printing it on paper, which is what the Game Boy printer used to do. Here's that Game Boy printer, by the way. It would print it on thermal paper.
Yes.
Which is just like receipt paper. That will actually dump the image as like a digital file, which is how I've been able to make I've made zines with the Game Boy camera. I've been able to make like larger prints, which I've somehow successfully been able to sneak into like legitimate art shows in the Detroit area.
Oh my.
Game Boy camera has like really opened up like a world for me. I owe a lot to this like weird little camera. I think it got me interested in music because of the sequencer you were talking about.
Yes.
Like very proto LSDJ stuff where you can go in and just program a short little like 16-step loop.
Dude,
it really encourages creativity.
Yes. It must be said too, because again, for the listener at home, the visuals on this episode that Dan is providing are top notch. You've got to go watch the YouTube version of this because you're not going to want to miss it. Even just showing
your
me,
eyes.
Like I see images of the Game Boy camera or the Game Boy printer all the time, but just to see it moving around in your space, it is good. There's so much that is so fascinating about this device, and I love hearing like what it has opened up for you in especially the last few years. Are there any other details that you want to share about like your experience with the Game Boy Camera, or like a detail about it that is just has captured you?
I think the big thing that it like captures me about it is like, because it encourages creativity, and like I also just generally encourage creativity. Like my daughter is she's a very adept artist at a very young age. So I am just shoveling resources at her as much as possible, because it's like, oh, if she finds joy in this, like I want to encourage this art as much as possible. And I love devices that do that, like for better or worse, like phones. You know, everybody's walking around with a really high power camera all the time. And so many people I know don't utilize that. Mm-hmm. Or I was talking to a buddy of mine, because the same deal, they were like, I want to shoot more with the Game Boy Camera. And I'm like, well, just shoot more with your phone. Yeah. Like you've got it in your pocket, just you're carrying it around everywhere. It goes everywhere with you. Take more pictures, just exercise that creative muscle. And the Game Boy Camera did that back in the day, but it did it for nerdy little me who carried my Game Boy Pocket around all the time. It was like, hey, you got it in your pocket. Take photos. Take cool Game Boy photos. So I was fascinated with it at a young age and put it away. And it was always like the thing, this and like a small handful of other games where it's like, no matter how hard times got, I cannot sell these games. Mm-hmm. These are just like too important. And the Game Boy Camera was always one of them, where it's like I would just dig it out every couple of years, take a couple of pictures, and then back into storage it would go, until I got the BitBoy, which that arrived like during the early lockdown days of the pandemic. So while everybody was looking for stuff to do to kind of keep them sane, I thought like I would start shooting with the camera more, now that I have this way to rip images off of it and like upload them to Instagram, say. I'll just start shooting until it gets boring. And that was like 3-4 years ago. Yeah. I'm still going strong. And it has opened up doors. Like the more I bring it about in Detroit, like Detroit has this nice little bustling art scene. It's a very, very artistic, like, you know, they should call it the Paris of the Midwest. Very artsy, very foodie city. Again, you sniped a lot of our good comedians, LA, but that's okay. I say what up, doe to all of them. But no, Detroit's just like this great little spot, and the art world's really welcomed me in this really fascinating way, where there's like a 2-step getting to know me process, where people will look at my art and they'll kind of walk by it because it's like pixel artwork. There's almost like this immediate kind of not discrediting is too harsh of a word, but they'll sort of look at it and walk right by, like, oh, it's pixel artwork. Pixel artwork is from video games. Video games are toys. Toys are for children. Yes. And then I'll show them the camera. Like when at these openings, I'll be like, this is what I shot those on. And I'll show it to them in action. And then I watch them do this complete 180 where they're like, wow, that camera sucks. Oh my God, I can't believe you shot like that on the camera. I'll fire up some of my own personal work here. So being able to carry this camera around just wherever really and get the images off wherever now allows me like these small crocodiles at the zoo, donuts, for example. Like a lot of people will walk by this in a gallery setting as just like, oh, it's pixel artwork. They must have just done this by hand. It's like, no, it's interpreted through this like really ratty little Game Boy camera. But a lot of detail will shine through in that kind of dithering pattern. So like this slate rock here, this pile of rock, you can see a lot of the cracks and sort of bumps and texture that come through. And that's all just implied with dithering. For example, these clouds, these are called mammatus clouds. It's when they like pillow up. They're very eerie looking. Clouds are very difficult to shoot with a Game Boy camera because it's so light. Dense. Yeah. Cameras like this, they do well in highlight settings, but if you're trying to get contrast, it's typically very, very difficult. It can only really work under like very special settings. So again, having that ease of just like, it's in my back pocket. I can pull it out now while the setting is good now. It can make these really interesting abstract images. This is the roof of the Detroit Institute of Art. This is like the ceiling of one of their main plazas. Okay. So it's like a couple skylights, a ring light, and then a painted ceiling. But it kind of has this like kaleidoscopic effect, almost like a magic eye, where it's like, unless you know what it is, it's like, well, it's a very nice, symmetrical design. Yes. But look at how much detail, like this one, for example, this carousel horse. Incredible. This one I look at often because it's like, I cannot believe the level of detail this camera could capture on here.
No, from the bulbs to the mirror to like what's reflected in the mirror and the pole coming out of the carousel horse, even its expression.
Mm-hmm. This poor horse looks terrified, by the way.
It's having a bad day.
This poor horse. So this is an arcade from Delaware, by the way. I had painted this piece. So what I did is I isolated out the two women standing in front of the gotcha machines in the arcade claw, and I painted it onto a canvas. But this is one of like the arcades that I believe I used to go to under new management in the Delaware area. So this is like back when I was in the Delaware area.
Wow.
A lot of detail that comes through. And this is all like stuff that a lot of people will try to capture with various like, it's got a filter that's Game Boy throwback. This is the interior of the Renaissance Center in Detroit, like a pretty iconic building in Detroit. Again, just the low, extremely low resolution lending itself to like really eerie, like alien qualities. As one of the main towers of the Ren Center through one of the windows in the lobby.
That is so striking.
You can get like very moody pieces out of this little bright pop of color of technology.
This should be like some of the, like this one in particular, Dan, looks like it should be a background image on like a Game Boy visual novel or something.
See, yes. And I guess that kind of is a good segue because a lot of people use this for more than just like photography. Like now that we can have, like me, for example, in my setup, I use an analog pocket, and that is what I'm running for because it gives me such a high resolution image. It gives me like a nice clean image. But because I have this setup, as long as I can attach this rig that I've got in front of me to like a dolly or something like that, I can start filming videos if I wanted to shoot a film with the Game Boy camera. The only thing stopping me is I'm a single dad and don't have the time to do it.
Yes. That's incredible. I, before I had the analog pocket, when I got my Game Boy camera, I was using the Super Game Boy on a Super Nintendo to capture the video for it, or even to bring those images onto my computer to then take a screenshot of. But with the pocket, that has kind of unlocked a whole new set of options where, like, because I've used the pocket to stream before by playing Game Boy Advance cartridges or whatnot, and this can provide such a similar thing. So if you got a dock,
you can use it as a webcam.
Yes, exactly. I just love hearing about your experience with it too.
I've leaned into it. It's part of my Twitch setup. It's just my identity now is the local Game Boy camera guy.
Yes. Has there been when you look back, whether it's like a more recent thing or something you experienced in years past, has there been another like big impact that the camera has had on you, whether it be you using it in a way you didn't expect or just toying around with it, or even like a connection that you made through it?
All the connections I've made so far in the Detroit art world are just solely because of the Game Boy camera. So yes. I do owe a lot to it because of that. But no, it's just I don't know specifically. No, I like carrying it around with me allows me to experience like that earlier sentiment that I had where people walk into the game store and they're like, whoa, over something that they love. I carry my pocket around with me most of the time. So I usually whip it out at malls or wherever I'm shooting, and people will see it. They'll either clock the camera specifically or the Game Boy, and it always opens up conversation. And I'm like the type of guy who just I like to talk to strangers, especially if it's game related. It's like, great, let's talk about games. But it is always fun. Like one time, my ex and I were going to a concert, and there was like a real hard ass bouncer who was like making everybody empty out water bottles and like looking through their bags and stuff. And then he goes into my bag and he opens it up, and just immediately I see all of this tough guy demeanor wash away, and he goes, "Oh, holy shit, dude." And he pulls out my Game Boy and he goes, "I had a red one too." Aww. And I was just like, "Aw," like had this very sweet moment with this guy where I was like, yeah, it works. Go ahead, fire it up. Take a couple pictures. And he like fired it up and like shot, me and my ex, and then like took a picture of himself and like took a picture of the parking lot. And he was like, "Thanks, dude. Anyway, in you go." And just like waved us in.
That's incredible. What
I was like, this little camera opens up doors, man.
Yes. I mean, all sorts of games can be such fun conduits for that connection like you were talking about, but like to have something as specific as this and as charming as this to be able to do that is just so lovely. Like that anecdote you just shared about just almost the guy's personality changing.
It truly, like Jekyll and Hyde, he was the sweetest man, but like up until then, barking at people to be like, empty that out before you get up here. Like, I don't even want to see a bottle with water in it before you step up here. Oh my God, is that a Game Boy Camera?
Yeah.
Like, he was just so like,
I don't know what I like the idea of better. The idea of him, maybe you changing him that day and him being sweet to everyone else, or him snapping back to that demeanor and being just gruff with people again. Either way, I'm tickled.
I hope that he had like an It's a Wonderful Life moment where he's like, I want to live, Clarence, and he ran home,
Yes. Mary, you see that Game Boy Camera? I'm going to throw a rope around it.
Merry Christmas, you old Game Boy Camera.
Oh, I love that. I had actually one thing I wanted to dive into a little more that you had brought up. Can you tell me more about this zine that you made using the Game Boy Camera?
Oh, yeah. So, one of the projects that I set myself up to do during the pandemic was to create a zine. Because I used to make like kind of crummy, like self-made zines. Mm-hmm. But I've been doing a series of like photography zines where I have gone through the Detroit Institute of Art and shot a lot of the paintings and like sculptures and things that are on display there.
Okay.
And so the series is called Reductive Gallery, and I used to be able to go there for free if you were a Wayne County resident. It was a great place to like take my daughter. We would just go there and like putz around. But then I brought my camera and I started shooting the paintings because I'm like, oh, look at how funny they look as pixelated, like highly reduced images. The actual image size of a Game Boy Camera photo is only 128 by 112 pixels.
Wow.
So that is like my phone, for example, has there's like a 108 megapixel camera on it. And my phone's like out of date by several years now. This camera is a 0.001434 megapixel camera.
Unreal.
So it would take these beautiful images that are, done by art masters and then reduce them to these like chunky little pixel things. But I'm like, a lot of the detail still comes through on a lot of these paintings. I actually have, hold on, let me see if I can get it real quick. We're going to have to look at some other pictures before we get to it. Here we go. So one of the fun effects that you can do with the Game Boy Camera is like if there's enough light reflecting off of your subject, it will wash out the background.
Okay.
So like this is a plate of sushi. I didn't shoot it on a black background. There was just so much light shining on the plate that it totally autofocused only the plate and drenched the rest of the background in black. And this is only something that you would figure out if you had like spent time just messing around with the camera in low light settings. There are autofocus modes that it'll snap into. So like here's a watermelon that I shot on the same sort of method.
Yes.
But like this statue, this is from the Detroit Institute of Art. And you can get these like very striking details where a lot of the statue detail still comes through. You can still see some of the folds in her hair shining through. But yeah, it's always so amazing. Like you'll just step back, take a look at your image, and it's like, oh wow, it's like magic. There's way more detail in here than even I thought there was when I shot the damn thing.
Yeah, gosh, there's just seemingly like endless like secret features or just components of this thing that you keep discovering.
Truly, and there's a lot of weird hidden history too, like stuff on the cutting room floor. This was supposed to be put into perfect dark. So like you, with the transfer pack, you were supposed to be able to take a picture of your own face and then map it onto a multiplayer character. But then guess what happened?
Violence, Columbine?
Columbine, baby.
Oh my.
So they had to take it out of the game because they didn't want anybody shooting their classmates, putting photos of their classmates on multiplayer characters and blasting them away. So we didn't get that. We also didn't get this Hello Kitty Game Boy camera. Like, no, what could have been? We were robbed. So this is only a production image of what was going to be released, but then they scrapped it. This was a long thought, like, mythical thing. A lot of people were like, the Hello Kitty camera doesn't exist. But there was a big Nintendo leak in like 2010 or something. And among the data leaked was the data from the Hello Kitty camera from Nintendo themselves. So it was very real.
Just think of the story
real.
that you would also have if you had to hunt that thing down on eBay.
Can you imagine? Look at that printer too. It's pink. It's got Hello Kitty stamps on it. It's beautiful.
Dana from Oregon would have had a task for you to take some photos off of that if it had existed.
Like dead mother. But no, the camera's also popped up in some really surprising places. Like, for example, Neil Young's Silver and Gold album is a Game Boy Camera photo.
Dude, this was like the only fact that I was going to share with you because it was the most interesting one that I found in a way that
Front
it was
and
used.
back.
Unreal. Incredible.
Shot by his daughter. I don't know how they got the image off. I also don't know how they got the image at such high quality. Like, this came out, I think, not too long after the camera came out, 1999 or 2000. So I'm like, how'd you rip that?
I wonder if it was a similar method to like what I was using with the Super Game Boy, is that they had something like that or professional with like a tech setup and could rip the image somehow. Yeah.
Or it could have also been a Mad Catz camera link, which you used to be able to use to rip your images from PC with this big chunky cable.
No way. Like that has to be the most useful thing Mad Catz ever made.
Oh, Mad Catz, God bless them. Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting things. There's like books and things too, like all about the Game Boy camera, this pocket camera guide that I have from Japan. There's also this really nice funtography guide from Nintendo Power themselves that's too big to fit in frame.
Oh my. Just so much love and lore for this thing.
I'm surprised that Nintendo kind of turned their nose up at it initially because I'm like, Nintendo is such a creatively driven company. You'd think that this would be everybody's wheelhouse and everybody's bread and butter. But the fact that it got friction until like Creatures Inc. stepped in is really surprising to me.
Yeah, that is bizarre. Dan, you have given us so much fun stuff to learn. Oh, you've taught us so much, and we've gotten to hear so many fun details from your life and ways that this like peripheral has woven its way into your life, both past and present. So I won't be asking you the typical like, hey, tell me what was like, unless there's more stuff you want to share, like what was going on in your life or like a moment you remember, because you've already been sharing those with me so well. But what I do want to do is sort of extend a little more, another moment to you to say, is there anything about this device or a place in your life that it holds, like another connection you have to it that you haven't spoken about today? I just want to make sure you get a chance to keep dumping if you got to dump.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. No, just truly, it it's surprising the things that you'll find that like resonate the most with you in life, I think. And it's always so surprising when something like this resonates so much, where you're like, I owe a lot of my success to this weird camera Nintendo made in 1998.
Yes.
But the reception that I get is always so warm and welcoming when it's like I am a Game Boy Camera funtographer by trade, and just the conversations that it welcomes, because everybody really has some experience nowadays. Especially, it's like everybody's played games, so it's just such a human experience to be like, yeah, I like games, and this is just an extension of my love for games.
Absolutely.
It's opened plenty of doors. I've had plenty of opportunities to be a part of like big projects that, again, it's just so surprising that the Game Boy Camera spurred like a Minecraft art gallery, one that you can visit entirely in Minecraft that is all Game Boy Camera themed. I think it's still live if you have Java or Bedrock. And go check them out at the Game Boy Camera Club, like GameBoyCameraClub.com. I think you'll find it. It's called the 2-Bit Contemporary Gallery, but it's like over 100 Game Boy Camera artists, and it's a gallery that they had made all in Minecraft. So all the Game Boy Camera art is on display, and it's this big, beautiful gallery that you can walk through. It's part of another virtual gallery made by Kat Graffam.
Okay.
Called the Game Boy Camera Gallery.
Wow.
This was a Game Boy game. Here, I'll pop it open real quick. Hold on. A Game Boy Camera game that they had made that has an art gallery in it as well. Again, all Game Boy Camera themed, but just like a little indie-made game.
That's incredible.
All about the love for the Game Boy Camera. There are dozens, as Tobias Funke would say, dozens of us. We're all sick. That. We love this camera.
Oh, well, I guess to sadly even just close out our discussion about this just absolute wonder, will you sort of just put a bow and on whatever place it holds in your life? If you could just sort of like summarize the place that it holds for you.
I love the Game Boy Camera.
We did it.
That's it.
Look at that.
That's all I got to say. No, it's such a special little thing. I think anything that encourages anybody to be creative is good. I think creativity is good, and I think more people need to be in touch with that creativity. So anything like camera like this or the camera in your phone, like just go out there and flex that creative muscle. I love a device like this that encourages that.
Wonderful. Well, Dan, we have one more fun segment on the show, but thank you so much for bringing this on and giving me a chance to have a very unique discussion for this show. Thank you so much.
Thank you for letting me rant.
You bet. I'm sure there's more we could have even got into.
Oh my gosh.
Well, so as I told you, we hit the one fun fact. We talked about the Neil Young album cover and the back of it. So I don't have a fun fact segment to dive in with you, but I do, of course, have to lead us into the game recommendation segment. Now, Dan, this segment is my forced tie-in to the movie Call Me by Your Name, where I am going to treat the Game Boy Camera as your passionate summer fling that you have in Italy, which unfortunately is not going to work out. So in order to help you, my friend, get over this heartbreak and get you back out there, I've got 3 potential new flings for you, 3 recommendations to help you get over this. Are you ready to get back out there, Dan?
I've only read that book once. Is the Game Boy Camera the peach?
I guess the Game Boy Camera is the peach. It's definitely not Army Hammer. No.
Oh no. I do love the Game Boy Camera, so let's go for it.
All right, sweet. So all of these 3 recommendations, every one of them has a little something in common with the Game Boy Camera, but they're all different. So first of which is that if what you really enjoyed about the Game Boy Camera is the creative limitation, that's your thing, and you want to flex your muscle with another creative suite. Well, of course, Dan, I'm going to recommend one of the obvious ones. Mario Paint, of course.
Oh, Mario Paint. I love Mario Paint. I might actually have a Mario Paint mouse within reach of me.
Oh! That's something that at this retro video game store that I've referenced, Game Realms, the first time I ever went there, I passed up. Dude, look at that.
Yep. Here's the mouse and mouse pad.
God, it's beautiful. Is the mouse pad plastic?
It is. Sure is.
I thought I heard like a sort of a sound that gave that away, and I was like, oh, that's not the mouse pad that I think of as far as like
it's a miracle I found it in there. It's just I just moved a bunch of stuff around in my office, so it's like boxes of stuff where it's like, I'll get around to that.
Wow, and it was just right there. I passed up buying one of these in 2019, the first time I ever went to Game Realms, and I just bought a loose copy of Mario Paint, which was just $1.
Nice.
But the game that came bundled with the mouse was only $20, and now I'm regretting that. Anyway, Mario Paint, that's your first rec. The second one that I have for you is that walking away from this, you're like, all I really want in my life are Game Boy peripherals. And you, Dan, you're actually feeling like you're a little practical. You want to put this to good use. I'll recommend the Game Boy Sonar, which was Japan only. I know you have to know about this.
The whole time I'm like, when do I get to butt in and joke that he is about to suggest the Game Boy Pocket Sonar?
Oh my gosh, you knew it.
I know of it. I also know about the Wonder Swan Pocket Sonar. There was one for the Wonder Swan as well. So this also has Gunpei Yokoi's fingerprints all over it.
Yes.
Because he was involved in both. I have only seen the Wonder Swan sonar. We had one at the shop that we sold a couple months ago, but we had it and it was amazing.
That is incredible.
Not only that, I think there is a speedometer. I think there is a motorcycle speedometer for the Game Boy, and there is also a sewing machine for the Game Boy.
Absolutely. It's just the sewing machine's the one I've heard about the most. This is how I'm learning about the speedometer, but the sonar is the most insane thing that I wonder if someone has to have used this practically and gone fishing with it.
I wonder too, because like because Game Boys weren't backlit when that came out. So I was like, could you see anything? Like, even in direct sunlight, it would just drown out whatever you were looking at.
Yeah.
So how useful were they? And then you'd be carrying your Game Boy around on the boat. It could get wet.
That would be my fear for sure, is like losing that to the water or just getting it soaked. So that the Game Boy sonar is your second recommendation. And finally, if you want to make the jump, Dan, from simple to an over-the-top peripheral, something that, you're moving from this limited, gorgeous little device to something that is almost unnecessary in how impractical it is. We're talking, of course, about the Steel Battalion controller for the original Xbox.
Yes.
Do you know
Steel
this
Battalion?
bad boy?
Yes, I do. Steel Battalion is one of my big game regrets where I'm just like, I should have spent more than I should have when it first came out just to have it.
Yes.
Because that would be another game that I would never get rid of. Somewhere recently, I saw somebody post at a convention. They had a full, I think that's an 8 or a 12 player game, right? They had a full Steel Battalion setup at a convention. It was just like this gauntlet of tables where it was like just nothing but military like netting and Steel Battalion controllers and screens, and it was beautiful. But damn it, that game is incredible. I have played it. Have you?
Never, not once.
It's fine.
But interesting.
Yes. So, and that's exactly the point. Is I'm like, Steel Battalion as an experience is a 10 out of 10. Steel Battalion as a game is a solid B. Like the controller itself is so large and unwieldy, it's ridiculous alone. That alone is worth the price of admission. But there are these really cool things in the game, like there's an eject button, and it's covered by a glass like box that you can flip open. You can't just flip it. You have to two-step switch. If you don't eject your pilot from your mech, you die and your save gets wiped and you have to start over. So there's permadeath in the game. I'm like, I love that. I love a big swing idea like that, where it's also on the controller and it's like a very important button that you have to like unlock, flip open, then eject. It's like, makes it feel so much more important and so cool.
Now that's immersion right there.
A friend of mine, actually, one more quick thing about Steel Battalion, sorry. A friend of mine has an uncirculated copy of Steel Battalion. So one that it's still in the box that it was mailed to game stores in the first place. Oh. Graded. It is the largest thing that WATA has ever graded. It is this massive box the size of a coffee table, but it is a sealed, still in circulation Steel Battalion that's been graded by WATA. Big shout out to Griffin for being a complete lunatic. I have no idea why you have this thing. Why do you have this thing?
If people think,
but I think about it every day.
Yes, if people think that the Earthbound box was big, wait till they see the Steel Battalion box. It's for the listener too at home. I don't think we've specifically described it, but the controller
takes up a whole surface.
Yes, this peripheral is essentially a bunch of pieces of plastic that are supposed to simulate essentially like being a pilot in a mech. So it's like all of the knobs and buttons and stuff that you would need theoretically.
Yeah, it's like when Han Solo's flipping switches, like as Zendaya would say, sci-fi shit in the Millennium Falcon. It's that, but it's a controller and there's a real game attached to it.
Yes.
Yeah, the game itself is okay.
Yeah. Well, anyway, just to close that segment out, I'll
good Rex. Good
Hey,
Rex.
thank you. I'll recap them too here. We have Mario Paint, the Game Boy Sonar, and the Steel Battalion controller. That's always a fun exercise on this show. It was especially fun coming up with fun ones for this. Dan,
oh man,
that'll end the recommendation segment, and that will actually bring us to the end of the show. So before we go today, once again, I know I already thanked you, but dude, thank you so much for taking the time to do this episode, bringing on your passion for the Game Boy camera, and doing this with me. It was a blast having you on.
Thank you. No, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. We were kind of kicking this down the road a little bit, like just getting in the way of games. I'm really happy that you gave me a platform to come and just rant about the Game Boy camera.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm no stranger to really earning an episode with a guest where we're like trying to make a date work and dates don't, and then they finally land. So this was great. On your way out, I know we plugged some stuff in the first half of the show, but what do you want to plug as we exit today?
So mostly you can find me on Twitch these days. I feel like that's where I'm most active.
Cool.
I'm on Twitch. I stream every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Like I mentioned, we're doing the March movie tie-in Madness. That's all March long.
You should post
we'll
that.
be doing some other...
I know you post in the Get Played Discord, but post in our Discord anytime. We have a stream links channel, so feel free.
Oh, send me that link.
Yes, definitely.
Send me that link. I'm very interested in always talking games with enthusiasts.
You'll
I'm
love
usually
it.
usually on Twitch every Monday, Wednesday, Friday evening about 10-ish Eastern time, my time, Detroit time. I'm also on Instagram if you like GameBoy Camera photography. I have years of it there.
Ooh.
I post sporadically whenever stuff lands in my lap and I shoot some interesting stuff. But I am also at Hello Dan Lane there. I'm also on YouTube where you can find a bunch of my archived Twitch streams with some past guests. And I'm thinking about uploading my entire Shenmue playthrough to that. We'll see. But other than that, you can find me at Linktree, which is linktr.ee/Hello Dan Lane. And that has all of my links, including a link to the Get Played Discord, which, listeners of this show would also enjoy.
Incredible. Well, dude, thank you. I'm going to include all that in the show notes. So listener, for all those things that I know you're frothing, you're foaming at the mouth to follow, scroll down in the show notes. You're going to see links to all of them. Dan, without further ado, I'll just go ahead and close us out with a mountain of plugs of my own. The cover art.
Take it away.
For Call Me By Your Game, thank you, is done by the artist Glenn J. You can find a link to his Instagram in the show notes as well. The original music, editing, and producing of this podcast is done by the great Jeremy Schmidt. You can thank him for all the work he does on this show by listening to his podcast, Video Games, a Comedy Show, another show that's on this network, more of a comedy roundtable style podcast. It's an absolute blast. I've been doing a lot of fun stuff over there lately, including our PlayStation 1 Desert Island Fantasy Draft scenario, the Space Solace. We just did that a couple weeks ago. It's on YouTube and all the podcast feeds. The show itself, you can follow on, of course, YouTube, Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok. I haven't posted a TikTok in a while, but I want to get back at it. So follow us on all those places. You can follow me on social media as well at either Connor McCabe or Connor_McCabe. I'm on Twitch at twitch.tv/consiscool69, where I'm mostly finishing up now. At this point, I'm probably done with it. My Control playthrough for the games club that we have over at Super NPC Radio, but I also have random stuff that pops up there. So random. So give me a follow there if you want to watch me play video games. And then lastly, follow the podcast network that we're a part of. The one that I created, Super NPC Radio. We're all over social media. We have a free feed for our legacy games clubs like the Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow one that I was telling Dan about earlier. There's a link in the show notes, but if you search Super NPC Games Club, you're going to find that. Give us a follow. Our Sonic Adventure Games Club is wrapping up there. And after that, our Resident Evil 2 Games Club from late 2023 will air. And if you like all the crap that we do and you've listened to those Games Club series and you want to find out what we're doing now as bonus incentives for our supporters, the most helpful thing you can do is check us out on Patreon over at patreon.com/Super NPC Radio. We have a free tier where you get the occasional bonus. We have our Games Club series at the $5 level. You can vote on our Games Club at the $1 level. If you find something and you want to support us, make sure it's sustainable for you. We want to keep people around and listening to our stuff, so don't go overboard with anything, but I think you might like what you find there. And that's really it. I've exhausted my plugs, and that's going to do it for another episode of Call Me By Your Game. We will see you on the next one.